Hello everyone, good evening. Welcome to today's session of NCERT Class 9 World History series. So we are covering India and Contemporary World 1 textbook. Okay, so this is a part of ongoing series where we have already completed standard 6, 7 and 8 history NCERT textbooks. Right now we are covering the 9th one and today it is part 4 out of 5. Okay, which means tomorrow this textbook also will be completed. Next week we will start with the standard 10 textbook, then 11 and 12 in the upcoming weeks. Okay, so by the end of this series the entire NCERTs will be done. Okay, so we can start the session for the day. Before we move on to the topics, let me just introduce you to about Unacademy. Unacademy is India's largest learning platform and it provides you with a wide variety of things, okay, including daily live classes where you can chat with your educator, engage in discussions, clear your doubts, so and so. Live tests and quizzes where you can, evaluate your preparation, you can evaluate yourself and gain more confidence by the time you reach the exam hall. Structured courses where the entire syllabus for the UPSC CSE will be covered in a timely fashion. Okay, since October 19th in Unacademy, we have started the Mission UPSC 2021 batch, where the entire syllabus will be covered by top reputed educators like Mrinal sir and all. Okay, so make sure to grab a subscription as soon as possible. There are some advantages also, I will tell you that. Anyway, Unacademy also provides you with unlimited access to all its resources, which are relevant for your examination based on subscription. So in order to get a subscription, all you have to do is download Unacademy Learning app. This can be done for free from Google Play or App Store. Okay, so get the app first and then you grab a subscription. Okay, so I am Madhav Sankar R Warrier. This is my Telegram channel where you can get a subscription, and if you follow this channel, you will be getting all the class notes, PDFs, links, schedules, etc. etc. Okay, also if you follow my Unacademy channel, unacademy.com/@msrw, you will be able to get notified whenever I schedule a class in the Unacademy Learning app. Okay, so Unacademy brings you all these top educators from all over the country, and you can use their help and their guidance to crack the examination. So for UPSC, there are two kinds of packages. One is the Plus package, other one is the Iconic. As far as Plus is concerned, so far what I have told you comes under Plus. Okay, so this is given to you in various length of packages, and a typical one would be a 1-year subscription. So if you go for a 1-year subscription, you will have to pay 49,500. But if you use my code MSRW1, you can actually get 10% discount and have to pay only 44,550 rupees. Clear? So this discount is applicable for all packages upon using my code MSRW1. Remember, for any subscriptions that is equal or above 6 months, you have the facility to pay the fee via EMI. Okay, no cost EMI facility is available for all subscriptions equal or above 6 months of time. Now, the other kind of subscription is known as the Unacademy Iconic. This is something exclusively made for UPSC aspirants, tailor-made for them, and is available to you in 3 packages: 1 year, 2 year and 3 year. So over and above the Plus package, you will be getting something extra here, which includes a personal coach. Somebody will be assigned to you as a guide or as a mentor, and that person will be there to help you throughout the exam preparation time. Then you have the daily mains answering practice, study planner, personalized feedback sessions. All these will be provided to you if you go for a Iconic subscription. Okay, and Iconic subscription 1 year costs you 69,500. Upon using my code MSRW1, you can avail a 10% deduction straight away. Clear? Now let's see what is the introductory offer of Unacademy. If you grab a subscription on or before 31st of October, you will get optional courses for free. You do not have to pay anything for optional subjects if you grab a subscription before 31st of October. Alright, so if you are going for a 1-year subscription, that is 12-month subscription, optional cost usually will cost you 27,500. But if you grab the subscription on or before 31st of October, this is free. Alright, you have to pay only for GS. Clear? So this is an introductory offer, and Unacademy offers you a lot of optional courses which includes but is not limited to the following: PSIR, Public Administration, Geography, History, Economics, etc. etc. So choose your optional and grab a subscription. These are the current rates for various courses. Optional course 1 month 5,000, GS 9,000. 1 year optional 27,500, GS 49,500. Okay, but if you are getting a subscription on or before October 31st, this section will be 0. Clear? This session will be 0. You have to pay only what is given here. Again, upon this, using my code MSRW1, you can actually avail a further 10% off. Ready? So make sure to grab a subscription as soon as possible. October 31st is just a couple of days away, so make sure to grab a subscription. Also, do look at my Unacademy channel where I have already completed many of my sessions. The World History series is going on there. We have completed about 11 lectures on World History so far in this channel. So make sure to take a look at that as well. Okay. So that is it. Good evening, Ramkumar. Okay. So yeah, that's it. We are going to start our session, and today's is lecture 4 out of 5. And the topic is livelihoods, economies and societies. This is based on your NCERT Standard 9 Chapter 4. Okay. So yesterday we saw about Nazi Germany, Hitler and all these things. It was most of world history topics until now. Okay. Now in this 4th lesson also we are going to see about world history, but not the history that we think about. Okay, which means we are not going to see political history of the world, but we are going to see how colonialism affected the economies, societies and forests during the early 20th century. That is what the focus of this lesson is. Okay, so today I don't think it will be a 2-hour session. I think it will be over before that. So let's see. Anyway, you all know that we have lots and lots of uses for forests. Correct, na? Forests have lots of producers. The major producers like timbers and all. Then minor forest producers are there. Honey, then tendu leaves, fruits, seeds, etc. etc. So all these resources are available in our forests, which means forests are one of the main source of resources. Also, forest is the home for a wide variety of animals, a huge number of species of animals. Okay, so forest is also a home for diversity. It provides species diversity. It provides species richness, etc. etc. All right, but we will see that during the time period between 17th end of 17th century to the end of 20th century, there is a sharp decline in the amount of forest all over the globe. Okay, so this abundance of diversity, this abundance of resourcefulness is actually seeing a decline in this set period, in this period of 300 years. Okay, so what happened? What happened is simple. Industrialization started in European nations. As a part of industrializations, these nations wanted more and more raw materials. Okay, so what did they do? They started establishing colonies in many African and Asian countries, also in Latin American countries. And these countries, or these so-called third world countries, have a huge abundance of forest compared to European nations. Okay, so basically for the Europeans, Africans, Asians and Latin American nations were probably the abode of resources or abode of raw materials to feed their factories. Clear? So when they colonized countries like India, they started cutting down forests for various purposes, especially for timber. Okay, and within a span of 300 years, within a span of periods between 1700 and 1995, 9.3% of the world's total area was cleared. Okay, 9.3% of the world's total area was actually cleared for the purposes of setting up industrial units, cultivation, pastures, fuel wood, and so on and so on. Okay, so for all these purposes, people started clearing forests. Okay, these colonizers, these colonizing countries or the Europeans. Now, in 1600, East India Company was set up. And remember, 1600 is the time when East India Company was set up, and later British started to come in India as traders, eventually started grabbing lands in India, annexing kingdoms, finally establishing the rule of the company, okay, and eventually culminating with the rule of crown in 1858. But when the East India Company was set up back in 1600, that is before the arrival of East India Company into India, 1/6 of India's land mass was under cultivation. Okay, 1/6 of India's land mass was under cultivation, and this amount went up to 1/2. That is 50% of India's land is right now under cultivation. Under cultivation means cultivation of crops, paddy, tea plantations, or oak plantations, whatever, some kind of cultivation. Okay, so why did this happen? What is the cause of this rise in land utilization for the purpose of cultivation? Simple. Population increase. Okay, during this time in the world, lots and lots of technology started developing. Many inventions in the field of medicine happened. Okay, the living quality of the people increased. So the life expectancy increased, birth rate increased, death rate decreased. Due to all these reasons, the population around the globe started to increase in a very rapid pace. When the population increases, obviously we need food. Right? Na? I mean, people need food to survive. So the demand for food also increased along with population. When the demand for food increased, the demand for more and more agricultural land also increased. And this search of new and new agricultural land led to something known as expansionism in agriculture. Okay, so these agricultural lands started to expand and encroach into the forest areas. Clear? So this is how cultivation actually entered the forest regions and eventually led to the wiping out of a huge amount of forest from the face of this planet. Okay, now let's see what happened in the colonial period. As I told you, cultivation expanded rapidly. Okay, and when cultivation expanded rapidly, British actually encouraged Indians to produce commercial crops. Earlier, before the arrival of the company, before industrialization, India was a subsistence economy, which means farmers produced goods or farmers produced these materials for subsistence, for eating. That's it. It was never a commercial kind of production. Clear? They were not aiming for surplus. They were aiming for subsistence level economy. But due to the demand of raw materials from the Europe, Britishers or the colonizers started forcing these colonies to produce commercial goods. Commercial crops like jute, sugar, wheat, cotton. Okay, cotton is one of the most important exports from India during that time. If you remember about the Calico Act and all, I have explained this earlier. Okay, the Calico Act regarding export of cotton, etc., etc. Then industries started coming up in India itself. TISCO was set up. All these things was discussed in previous lessons. Okay, so commercial agriculture expanded. And the problem with commercial crops is the more you produce, the company will ask to produce even more because they are greedy. Okay, so as a result of this, the amount of forest started declining throughout the world. In the early 19th century, the colonial states thought that forests were unproductive. They considered it to be wilderness. Okay, so during this time, when British initially came to India and during the time of the Crown Rule and all, actually these Europeans considered forests as wilderness. Okay, wilderness means what? They did not consider it as anything developed. Okay, they considered forests as mark of lack of civilization. According to them, a civilized nation will have lots and lots of buildings and vehicles, etc., etc. Alright, so forest was a mark of lack of civilization. Clear? So this was the mindset of British at that time. Between 1880 and 1920, that is the later part of 19th century and earlier part of 20th century, cultivation area rose by 6.7 million hectares. This is what I told. Expansionism as far as agricultural sector happened around the start of 20th century. Clear? Which led to the huge downfall of forests. For an example, this picture shown here is taken from your NCERT textbook, and this picture shows that in the Latin American countries or in the great North American plains, for example, lots and lots of bisons and other cattle were in existence at the period between 1860s, period around 1860s. But when these colonizers went there, they indiscriminately killed these animals for various purposes, and they reclaimed all this land for setting up industries, for setting up factories. Okay, so lots and lots of animals, plants, trees, all these were considered as a symbol of lack of civilization by colonies. Okay, now in the 19th century, due to the industrialization, the oak forests in England started disappearing. Okay, oak is a tree that provides hardwood for various purposes. It's an excellent quality wood used for constructing ships, constructing houses, doors, etc., etc. So due to the indiscriminate felling of these trees in England, there occurred a lack of oak forests or oak trees. So this meant that there is no more wood available for the construction of ships for the Royal England Navy. Okay, the Royal Navy, which is the most superior navy in the world. If you remember, Britain, there was no competition for Britain as far as navy is concerned. They were number one in the world. And when in the 19th century there was a lack of timber, there occurred a phase where no more ships could be produced for the Royal Navy. In order to compensate for this, in 1820, the English king sent search parties in search of oak woods. Okay, in order to find new goods, in order to find new colonies where these kinds of woods are available. And these search parties finally reached India. Okay, they also came in India. And when they came to India, they saw the species richness and the abundance of hardwood trees in the Indian subcontinent. Alright, and when they found this much quantity was available in India, they started indiscriminate felling of these trees and packing it to Europe. Okay, also spread of railways, fuels, sleepers, all these also led to the decline of forest. Why? Because when railways are spreaded, or in 1854-53, that time, railways came to India. Okay, so in order to construct these railways, lots and lots of wood are necessary for two things. One, as fuel. Okay, coal is the main fuel, but wood is also used as fuel. Then to construct sleepers. Okay, in order to lay tracks, you need many sleepers, and these sleepers are actually constructed based on wood. Okay, good quality hardwood. So for all these purposes, even more trees started to be put down, and railways expanded in India at a very large pace, which means more and more number of trees and forests were felled in order to construct railways crisscross the country. Alright, so government gave out contracts to individuals to supply the required quantities of wood. And when individuals get these kinds of quotations, what they do? They will start trying to make advantage of the situation. They will start, indiscriminate exploitation of forests to gain more and more profit. So these contractors who got contract from the European nations started falling trees indiscriminately. Okay, and this led to lack of forest, and this led to indiscriminate exploitation of biodiversity. So you can see some figures here showing big logs taken away from forests for industrial purposes. You can see wild animals like elephant are used for taking wood to from one place to another. So these kinds of activities were held in a large number during this period. Another method or another form of cultivation that the British or the colonizers employed in its colonies is known as plantations. You might have heard of these plantations. It's not just agriculture. Plantations means something like a estate. Okay, you might have heard of tea estate, coffee estate, rubber estate, which means what? A huge tract of land is taken by a person, maybe a landlord, and in this area, a particular crop is cultivated in huge quantities. For example, in Assam, tea estates are very, very well known. Similarly, coffee estates are there in some other parts of the country. Rubber estates are prevalent in Kerala. Okay, so these kinds of estates started coming up. Again, the problem is, in order to construct these estates, such huge land patch is necessary. Okay, estates cannot come up in small, 2 cents or 3 cents. It need acres of land. Okay, for that purpose, they indiscriminately cleared lots and lots of forests. So, cutting off this biodiversity, when one tree falls, with it falls a lot of other species. Okay, that is what environmentalists say. So, when you clear a forest area, a huge forest area, we lose a lot of diversity in species, in biodiversity, etc., etc. And this is actually replaced by tea plantations, coffee plantations, rubber plantations. So it is one variety. One variety is replacing an abundance of richness of species. Okay, so gave vast areas to European planters at very cheap rates in order to cultivate these beverages and these goods which are of immense demand in European nations. Okay, so plantations came up in around this time. Now, the rise of commercial forestry. How did the rise of commercial forestry affect the biodiversity in India? Now, people were worried that the use of forest by local people and the reckless felling of these trees by traders would destroy the forests. Okay, so the English people, the Europeans, were afraid that if the local people were allowed inside the forest, they will, recklessly or carelessly fell the trees, and it would ruin the forest. Okay, so what did they do? They started making various acts. They started making various laws by which local community was prevented from getting into these forests. Also, along with that, British brought in a very famous expert named as Dietrich Brandis to India to look into the situation of forests. Okay, German expert named Dietrich Brandis. And Dietrich Brandis became the first Inspector General of Forest in India. Okay, he became the first Inspector General of Forest in India. He was assigned the task of looking into the status of forests throughout India by the British government. Alright, when Brandis looked into these forests, when he toured through these forests, he understood that there is no proper system in place which is actually managing this forest. Local people are getting in, taking their goods, going out. Some people are felling trees. Contractors are exploiting forests. So there is no proper structure or system in place that is taking care of the forest in the country. So what did he do? He created something known as science of conservation. Okay, he brought in this theory known as science of conservation, which means these forests has to be conserved or should be used in such a scientific manner rather than careless and reckless felling of trees and exploitation of goods. Okay, so in order to implement this science of conservation, he required some kind of legal sanction. Okay, and this requirement of legal sanction started the formation of forest laws in India. British eventually classified the forest as reserved forests, community forests, etc., etc. So the starting of all these forest laws is from here. Okay, from the German expert Dietrich Brandis, who came to India on invitation by the British as the first Inspector General of Forest of India. And as a result of this, in 1864, Indian Forest Service came into existence. IFOS, Indian Forest Service. Even now, civil service people also prepare for IFOS. Okay, so the beginning of IFOS is in 1864 based on the recommendations of Dietrich Brandis. Clear? Later on, the next year itself, Indian Forest Act was passed by the British government. Now, along with this, in order to in order to imbibe or in order to input more forest education into the community, into the officials, they also set up Imperial Forest Research Institute. Imperial Forest Research Institute, or IFRI, was set up in Dehradun in 1906. And this institution was focused on teaching scientific forestry. Okay, science of conservation, which evolved later into scientific forestry. So what is this scientific forestry? Scientific forestry means, according to this method of forestry, natural forests were cut down. Okay, this was nothing scientific actually. This was just greediness of British. I will tell you why. Because natural forests were cut down. And one type of tree was planted in straight rows, just like in plantations. You can see a picture here. Just look at this picture. The forests are cut down and one particular type of tree that is required for commercial purposes is planted in correct rows and columns. Okay, this picture also shows you the same thing. One type of tree. So, and this is named as scientific forestry. Okay, I mean it's a really stupid name. I mean, there is nothing scientific about it. It is completely based on British greed to expand their commercial, forest produce. Okay, so this is from where idea of plantation started coming up, and area cut was then to be replaced by replanted so that it is ready to be cut again in some years. Okay, once this tree has grown up, it is cut down for timber purposes, and then some other plants are constructed, or some other plants are allowed to grow in this region for a short time. Later on, again this is cleared and another set of commercial purpose trees are planted. This is how it went on. Okay, so later on this was amended twice, once in 1878 and later in 1927. Okay, this was amended twice. The 1878 Act divided forests into three categories. This is where we see the forests are classified as reserved forest, protected forests and village forests. Even now these kinds of classifications exist. Okay, so the root of the classification, the first time it was done was in 1878 as an amendment to the Indian Forest Act. Clear? So according to this act, the forests were classified as three: reserved forest, protected forest and village forests. Villagers could not take anything from reserved forests. Okay, so villagers were strictly banned from entering these reserved forests. But as far as other two forests are concerned, like protected forests and village forests are concerned, they were allowed to use, or they were allowed to enter this forest for the purpose of building house and in search of fuel. They can use forest produce and they can collect forest produce for the purposes of building house and or for finding fuel. Okay, from second and third category of forest, that is protected forest and village forest. Reserved forest was strictly forbidden from the entry of any native villages. Now, how were the lives of people affected? So when British started imposing all these rules in India, obviously it affected the traditional life of the natives. So how was this affected? Okay. Foresters and villagers had very different ideas of what a good forest should look like. Okay, I mean, the concept of forest was different for different people. According to the natives, a very good forest will be a mixture of species. Lots and lots of different varieties of trees, different varieties of animals, etc. etc. Species diversity and species richness were focused on by villagers. As far as the British Forest Department was concerned, they wanted the forest to look like something, a resource of hardwood trees. Okay, they want to build more and more ships. They want to expand the railways. For all these purposes, they need hardwood. Tall, straight hardwood. For example, teak or say salwood. Okay, so the concept of forest for Britishers, where the forest is an abode of timber. That is it, for commercial purposes. Forest Act meant severe hardship for the villagers across the country. So when villagers were prevented from entering forests, suddenly, all of a sudden, they started facing various kinds of difficulties because it was accustomed to their life for using these forest resources for their purposes, daily needs, etc. So after the act, all their everyday practices started to come down. I mean, these everyday practices were branded as illegal. Correct, na? They cannot enter the forest. They cannot graze their animals to forest. They cannot collect the forest minor produces like fruits, seeds, etc. etc. They cannot hunt, go for hunting. Alright, so all these practices which was traditional to the life of Indian natives or the people of India suddenly became illegal when British passed this law. Alright, so what did the people do? When such sudden changes occurs, people will obviously protest. And along with this protest, they will also go for theft. Okay, thievery or theft. So say right now in India, if the government of India bans something, obviously the next thing that is going to happen is starting of smuggling. Okay, people will obviously smuggle things from outside. So the exact same thing happened. People began to go for theft and smuggling. Women were also affected in a huge way. Why? Because usually women are the people who go to forests and collect these things. Men will cut down and do the physical labor and all these things, but women, collect the fruits, roots, seeds, etc., etc. So when women also entered the forest, British officials started harassing them, and they started demanding food, etc., etc., to as a bribery, as a bribe. Clear? So all in all, Indian natives started to feel the heat of the new British forest laws. Now, how did forest rules affect the cultivation? We right now understood how it's affected the lives of Indian people. Now let's see how did it affect the cultivation. Okay, how did it affect the agriculture or the subsistence agriculture that existed in India at that time? You all know that in the native Indian society, the predominant method of agriculture was shifting cultivation. Okay, shifting cultivation was the practice method. Shifting cultivation is also known as Swidden agriculture. Clear? I'm pretty sure that many of you do not know this term. Okay, both these are same. Shifting cultivation also means Swidden agriculture. Same, they are coterminous. Now, this is also known by some other names, some other local names in various other parts of the world. Okay, for example, lading in Southeast Asia, milpa in Central America, chitmean or tabby in Africa, and China in Sri Lanka. All these are synonyms for shifting cultivation. Clear? In various parts of the world. This can be asked for prelims, maybe in geography. Okay. Also, within India itself, different parts of India had different names for shifting agriculture. For example, Thia, Penda, Bewar, Nebad, Jhum. This is a very famous name, Jhum. Okay, so jumming is a very a prominent form of agriculture. Podu, Khandad, Kumri. So these are all synonyms for shifting agriculture. So yeah, if in the question paper one of these other terms come, do not be confused with anything else. It is basically shifting agriculture. So according to shifting agriculture, this is how it worked. A patch of forest land is actually cut down. Okay, so all the trees in a small patch of forest is cut down. Then it is burned. Okay, the entire forest is burned. You can see here. It is cut down and it is burned. For this reason, it is also known as slash and burn agriculture. Okay, slash and burn agriculture. So now the patch of trees are cut down, it is burned, and then in these ashes the seeds are sown. Okay, before the monsoon rains arrive, in this ash dump, new seeds are planted, and the crop is harvested around October-November time. Clear? So this is cultivated for a couple of years, and then they will go to another area, again cut down the trees and again burn them and again plant, do the cultivation there. Clear? So they will keep on moving from one patch to another. So each time they do this, a fresh patch of forest is slashed, a fresh patch of forest is burnt. Okay, they will come back to the original land only after say 12 or 18 years. This is the time which it takes for the forest to grow up, to attain some kind of nutrients. Alright, so this is actually a very ineffective and a very uneco-friendly method of agriculture, which is right now prohibited in India. But again, this was the prevalent method of agriculture during the arrival of British. Alright, now in these lands, a mixture of crops are grown. A wide variety of crops are grown. In Central India and Africa, it could be millets. In Brazil, it could be manioc. And in other parts of say Latin America, it could be maize or beans. So in different parts of the world, the same method of agriculture, that is known as the chumming agriculture or slash and burn agriculture, was used in order to grow a wide variety of crops. Clear? But when the Europeans came to India, or Europeans went to these colonies, they understood that this is a very bad method. This is a harmful practice. Why? It's not because they were, environmentalists or anything. It is just because they were afraid that the burning of forests might actually hamper their timber cultivation. Okay, these flames may not be, sometimes these flames cannot be controlled, and it might, catch on to other parts of the forest where they have already started growing timber varieties of plants which are costly. Clear? So what did the government do? Government did not want this to continue, so they banned shifting agriculture. Clear? Also, if people continued shifting agriculture, it is really hard for the government to impose tax. Okay, calculating tax is a very difficult thing as far as shifting agriculture is concerned, because they are keeping on moving from one region to another. They will change the kind of crops they are growing. The kind of output is different. So taxing is a really difficult task as far as slash and burn agriculture is concerned. So due to all these reasons, the European colonizers actually banned this kind of agriculture throughout their colonies. Okay, now who were given the permission to hunt? Okay, I told you Europeans are in India. They have changed, or they have imposed lots and lots of forest laws, so which has affected the local, which has affected the life of the natives of India. So let's see what other changes happened other than felling trees or collecting forest materials. What else changed? Earlier, before the arrival of British and all, Indians used to go hunting. Okay, hunting deers, partridges, small other animals, etc., etc. But when British imposed these forest laws, hunting was banned. Okay, and whenever a person went for hunting, he was actually punished for poaching or hunting. All right, and hunting, but even though British did all these things, it eventually became a sport. Clear? So hunting of tigers and other animals had been part of the culture of nobility of India. If you remember, I mean, if you go to old palaces and all, you will see large portraits of tigers. The king is, standing on top of a tiger, or maybe a large, a stuffed tiger or something like that. So hunting is a part of India's, nobility. All right, and in the Mughal paintings also we can see something like this. When Britishers came to India, they stopped the locals, they stopped the native Indians from hunting. But they started hunting on their own. Okay, they imposed restrictions on Indians, but they started doing hunting more and more, which means more and more animals started losing their life. And this indiscriminate hunting eventually led to the extinction of a wide variety of species. Clear? India lost a wide variety of species during the time of British because of indiscriminate hunting. Good evening, Pankaj. Good evening, Anand. Alright, so this is how it was going on. By killing dangerous animals, British thought that they are actually civilizing India. So the concept of British at those times was animals like lion, tiger, leopard, cheetah, wolf, etc. are wild animals. I mean, they are a part of wilderness. They are a mark of the lack of civilization. Okay, so by hunting these animals, these big wild cats, they actually thought that they are civilizing Indians. This was their mindset. Also, for killing tigers, wolves, etc., rewards were announced by British government. So if a native kill a tiger or a wolf, then a reward was announced for the purpose. Clear? I mean, right now hunting of wild animals is really restricted in India, and you cannot hunt certain animals like tigers, etc., etc. But this mindset came very, very late. This came only in the 1990s. But until then, hunting of wild animals was actually a sport, and British actually promoted this sport. For example, Maharaja of Sarguja, he alone shot 1,157 tigers, 2,000 leopards, etc. up to 1957. One person killed this many wild cats during this time, thanks to the British. A British administrator named George Yule, he killed 400 tigers. So these are all recorded. I mean, Britishers considered this as a mark of glory, as a prideful event. Okay, they did not see this as indiscriminate destruction of wildlife diversity. Okay, so certain areas of forest were reserved for this purpose, for hunting purpose. Alright, so now let's see what are the new trades and new employments that developed around this time. Clear? So imposition of these forest laws actually made the life of a lot of people in misery. I told you that already. But this also made some others make huge profit. Okay, some others were able to take advantage of this situation. So many communities left their traditional occupations and started trading in forest produce. The growing demand of rubber. Okay, the Mundurusu peoples of the Brazilian Amazon. So one of the predominant colonies of Europeans was Brazil. Okay, the Latin American countries, especially Brazil, because a huge portion of the Amazon rainforest is in Brazil, and Amazon rainforest has a huge variety of species. One of the most species-rich areas in the globe is Amazon rainforest, and this is located in the Latin American country of Brazil. Okay, so here also people started to move away from their traditional livelihood jobs, and they also started trading in forest goods. Why? Because the demand for rubber was very much coming up in European nations. So in order to grow more and more rubber trees, they started felling Amazon rainforest. Huge tracts of lands were cleared and rubber trees were grown by the people of Mundurusu tribe. Alright. Similarly, in India also, trade in forest produce was nothing new. Adivasi communities traded in elephants, the elephant tusk, rhino horns, etc. were traded by Adivasi communities in India. Alright, and they actually combined with the Banjaras. Banjaras are traders, okay, caravans or traders. So these Adivasis actually collected all these forest produce and they traded these goods with the rest of the world using these Banjaras. Okay, when Britishers came, they imposed regulations on this kind of trade. So the local Indians were not allowed to conduct this kind of trade, but they allowed the same for European companies. Okay, so lot of European trading firms were allowed to collect forest goods and trade in forest goods and earn huge profit, while the same was forbidden for the native Indians. Clear? Why? I mean, what else did the British do? They imposed restrictions in grazing, hunting, etc. etc. Pastoralists and nomad communities like the Korava, Karacha and Yerugula of the Madras Presidency lost their livelihood. These tribes who lived out of this forest produce were called as criminal tribes. Okay, very important. They were termed as criminal tribes. Later on, after getting independence, they came to be known as vulnerable tribal groups, VTG. And eventually it got another classification called PVTG, particularly vulnerable tribal group. You hear this often in your current affairs materials. Okay, so these PVTGs are actually the so-called criminal tribes, or the people who were branded as criminal tribes by the British people. Okay, so when they lost their livelihood, these people started to look for new opportunities. Okay, and they went to other areas, other states, other parts of the country, and even to other countries in search of new job. But in search of new job, I mean, they got a job, but that was not always of high quality. They had to live in misery. For example, in Assam, both men and women from these forest communities were actually forced into tea plantations, okay, tea estates, and they had to live with very low wages, very unhygienic places, in a very bad condition. Okay, so those people who quit their traditional livelihood and went for other jobs, in search of other jobs, did not always succeed, or even if they succeeded, they had to live a miserable life. And Britishers made sure that they, bound them with various kinds of contracts, preventing them to quit that job and go back home. Okay, so workers were actually exploited at this time. You can see another image here. Here, one of the British Governor Generals, Lord Reading, he has went for a hunting expedition and he has himself killed so many tigers. See, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So in one hunting, this person actually killed 8 tigers. So this was the fashion, or this was the indiscriminate killing of wildlife by the British or by the colonizers, just for sport. Okay. Now, when Britishers imposed all these kinds of restrictions on native Indians, and they themselves did all these things, some of the Indian people started to protest. Okay, so this led to lots and lots of rebellions across the country in the subject of forest. Okay, so many forest communities has rebelled against England at various time periods. We will study about all that when we study the modern Indian history in the standard 12 textbook. Okay, but we have to look at some of them right now. One of them is the Sidhu and Kanu in the Santal Paraganas. Then one is Birsa Munda in the Chotanagpur region. Alluri Siddharamaraju in Andhra Pradesh region. So these are examples of some of the forest community rebellions against the British imposition of forest laws. But we are not going to study in detail about these 3 things, but we will be studying about Kingdom of Bastar. Okay, the Bastar rebellion of 1910 is very important, and so we will be looking into that. The NCERT textbook actually provides detail about this particular rebellion. Understand that when UPSC asks questions in prelims, they can actually ask you to match the person who led the revolt and the place where he led the revolt. Okay, for example, Alluri Siddharamaraju, he actually led the revolt in Andhra Pradesh. Sidhu and Kanu led it in Santal Paraganas. Birsa Munda in Chotanagpur region. So you have to be able to match correctly or identify whichever pairs are correctly matched. Okay. So the people of Bastar. Bastar is a place in Chhattisgarh. Okay, but it has also borders in Andhra Pradesh, Odisha and Maharashtra. Clear? The center part of this Bastar region is a plateau. The northern portion of this plateau is the Chhattisgarh plain and the south portion is the Godavari plain. Okay, so basically the topography is something like this. Clear? Here we have, if this is the north and this is the south, then here we have the Chotanagpur plains, here we have a plateau and here we have the Godavari plains. Okay, and through this plain, the river Indravati winds across Bastar from east to west. Indravati, one of the tributaries of Godavari, very important. This is the river that flows through the Bastar region. Bastar region has multiple forest communities, not just one. Okay, for example, they have the Maria community, they have the Muria Gonds, the Thurwas, Bhatras, Halbas, etc. etc. All these people had different kinds of languages, but since they were sharing a common space, their customs and beliefs were more or less similar. I'm not same, but similar. Okay, so a wide variety of people actually lived in this small region. They believed that each village was given to its land by earth. Okay, each village was given its land by earth, and in return they are supposed to take care of the earth. Okay, so these kinds of beliefs were there among the tribal people. Okay, they believed that earth only gave them this land, so they have to repay earth by conducting various offerings, agricultural festivals, etc. etc. They were in the belief of respecting rivers. I mean, they believed that these rivers, mountains, forests, etc. had their own spirits and they worshipped all these spirits. Okay, so the local people looked after all natural resources within their own boundary. They were very particular about it. They used to take care of whatever is within their territory. Okay, and when a person from one tribe goes to collect something from another tribe, he actually was supposed to give a tax in exchange, a fee in exchange, and this fee was known as Devsari. Devsari or Dand or Man. Okay, Man. No, it's not Man, it's Man. So Devsari, Dand or Man. These are the fees that was levied on another tribe when they come to collect some product from a different tribe. Clear? So this can also be asked for UPSC. What is the meaning or which of the following best describes the term Devsari? And they will give a couple of options. 4 options will be there. You will have to pick the correct one out of that. So you should be able to remember what this is. Okay. So every year there is one big hunt where the headman of the village in the Paragana meet and discuss the issues of concern, including forest. So in the villages, they also go for hunting, but once in a year. I mean, one big hunt is organized once in a year. Why? Because without hunting, these wild animals might come into land and destroy all the crops or may cause harm to the human beings or the villagers. Okay, so to prevent this from happening, once in a while, hunting expeditions are organized. Clear? To clear away all the wild animals who are actually posing threat to the human life and property. Okay, so what are the fears of the people? I told you British imposed lots and lots of new regulations and restrictions, and obviously the people are afraid. So what are their fears? Some villages were allowed to stay on in the reserved forest on the condition that they worked free for the forest department. Okay, so most of them were evicted, and most of them voluntarily went to other regions in search of a different job. I already told you that. But a portion of them were allowed to stay back on the condition that they work for the British. Okay, they will work free for the forest department of Britain, and for that they will be allowed to stay in these reserved forests. For this purpose, those people who stayed back, or those villages which stood back and agreed to help the British people, were eventually known as forest villages. Okay, so the people in forest villages had the right to stay inside the restricted forest, but they have to work for free for the British colonial powers. Clear? During this time, terrible famines happened all over the world. I mean, especially in India. I mean, famines were breaking out in different parts of the world, in different colonies. And one such famine happened in 1899-1900 period in India. And one repeated again after 7 years. Okay, so the life of people became even more and more miserable. So more and more resentment started rising up against British. Alright, we will see that this eventually will turn into a protest. The Thurwas of the Kangar forest, where reservation first took place, these are the first people who actually went on with the protest. The Thurwas of the Kangar forest. This is the first area where the British put in this reservation system. The reserved forest was announced in this region first. Okay, but there was nobody to lead this rebellion. It was a leaderless kind of movement. But the popularly accepted person was Gundathur. Gundathur was accepted as the leader of the revolt, but there was no single leader. It was a group activity. Okay, so Gundathur from the village of Nethana was an important figure in this rebellion organized by the people. In every village contributed something to the rebellion expenses. Okay, so what did the British do? British did what they usually do. They tried to suppress the troops with force. Okay, they sent troops with arms and all, and to suppress this rebellion one way or another. Adivasi leaders tried to negotiate. They did not want to go into a war or anything, so they tried to negotiate. But what did the British do? Again, they considered Adivasis as inferior people, and for that purpose, they fired upon them. Lots and lots of people end up dead. Okay? But when this happened, many people died here also, in the Bastar region also. But Gundathur, the important person as far as this rebellion is concerned, he escaped. Britishers never managed to catch him. Eventually, the rebels won. Okay, although Britishers managed to do all these horrific activities, the rebels won in the end. And due to their victory, the work on reservation was temporarily suspended by the British. Okay, I mean, they were against forest reservations. They were against imposing sanctions on forests. So they conducted this rebellion. They won, and when they won, Britishers agreed to temporarily suspend the forest reservations, which means the natives can enter forest and collect their livelihood. Alright, and the area to be reserved was reduced to roughly half of that was planned before 1910. Okay, not only that they allowed people to enter this reserved forest, but also the area which was supposed to be under the reserved forest was reduced by about 50%. Clear? So this was a victory for people. But we have to understand that later in 1970s also, some kind of similar occurrence has happened in the independent India. World Bank, alright, World Bank started a project which was based on the natural sal forest. Okay, this natural sal forest was replaced by tropical pine to provide pulp for the paper industry. This was a World Bank led project implemented in India. But when people went there to cut down these trees, the local natives as well as the environmentalists objected. They stopped this project. So we see that in many occurrences, these kinds of non-eco-friendly forests, these kinds of projects which are harmful to the forest were actually stopped by the local community along with forest enthusiasts or environmentalists. Clear? This is the case in India. We have to look at some other colonies also. For example, forest transformations in Java. Okay, so Java is an island in the country of Indonesia. It became very famous for a number of reasons. For example, during the tsunami time, Java was one of the focus points. Sumatra, Java, etc., etc. So Java is right now a rice producing area in Indonesia. But it was not so before the arrival of Dutch. Okay, before the Dutch came or before the colonizers came to Indonesia, Java was a full forest region, heavily forested region. Okay, but you know that there was a competition between English and Dutch to establish their authority or dominance in India. But later on, what happened? Both of them agreed upon a some kind of pact based on which English gets India, the Dutch will go to Indonesia. Dutch can hold Indonesia. British will withdraw from there. In return, Dutch will withdraw from India and focus on Indonesia. So when the Dutch reached Indonesia, when they reached to Java, they saw this species abundance as a abode of raw materials, abode of timber. So they also started cutting down trees, and very soon Java became an agricultural land. Clear? The forests were fell and it became an agricultural land. So Java in Indonesia is where the Dutch started forest management. So their forest management activity, which is equivalent to that of British. Nothing to manage, it is indiscriminate felling of trees for commercial purposes. It was started by Dutch. Clear? Now, similar to India, here in Java also we see a lot of tribals. One such tribal group is known as Kalangs. Kalangs are skilled forest cutters. Okay, and they are also practicing shifting agriculture, shifting cultivation or jamming. So this group was very popular in the area of Java. In 1755, the Mataram kingdom of Java split. Okay, just like India, this place was also ruled by various dynasties, and in the early part of the 18th century, it was ruled by a kingdom known as Mataram. And due to some conflicts, the Mataram kingdom actually split into two. Okay, and during their split, 6,000 Kalang families were equally divided between the two kingdoms. I think now you understood the importance of Kalangs in Java. Okay, Kalangs are such important tribal people because they have superior skills in cutting down forests. Clear? So even the kingdoms wanted them more and more. So the Dutch people, when they tried to colonize this region, they also tried to make Kalangs work under them. They also wanted the Kalangs to work under them. In 1770, Kalangs resisted this by attacking a Dutch fort in Joanna. But the uprising was suppressed. Okay, so everywhere, not just in India, not just in Java, everywhere in the world, whenever the colonizers tried to meddle with the tribals, they started rising against these officials. And each time, the officials used brute force to put them down. There are exceptions in India where the oppression tactics did not work against the tribals, and eventually British had to bow down to the pressure. Okay, some exceptions were given to the tribals eventually. We will see about that in a future textbook. Okay, now let's see what is the so-called scientific forestry as proposed by the Dutch. We already saw the scientific forestry by British, which is absolute crap. It is nothing of scientific. It is just indiscriminate felling for commercial purposes. Now let's see what the Dutch designed. So in the 19th century, Dutch enacted forest laws in Java. Okay, they enacted forest laws in Java just like British did in India. So according to these forest laws, wood could be cut only for specific purposes. Okay, it cannot be cut for the local needs or anything. It has to be for specific purposes, that too under supervision. Clear? So wood was cut from specific forest areas only under supervision. This was part of this Dutch scientific forestry. Villagers were punished for grazing cattle in young strands, transporting wood without permit, traveling on forest roads with horse carts, cattle, etc. So just like British reserved forest, Dutch also implemented the same system in Java. So managed forests, they actually managed forests for the sole purpose of shipbuilding and railway construction. Clear? I mean, this was the target of all colonies. They wanted wood, and timber was required for two purposes. One is shipbuilding, which was the most popular form of international transport at that time. Second one, railways, which connects the interior of the country with these shipping terminals. Okay, so for these two purposes, the requirement of timber was immense. And for this purpose, lots and lots of forest patches were cleared and was replanted with timbers of hardwood trees. Clear? So Dutch imposed rents on the land being cultivated in the forest and then exempted some villages from these rents if they worked collectively to provide free labor, buffaloes for cutting and transporting timber, which is known as the Plantations system. Okay, so again, similar to the British, what they did in India, Dutch also allowed some of the natives to live within the reserve forest upon the condition that they will work for the Dutch company. Okay, they will provide free labor for the Dutch company. They will provide their buffaloes for transportation, etc., etc. So this arrangement or this system was eventually named as Plantations system. Okay, Plantations system. Don't forget. Later, instead of exemption from tax, forest villagers were given small wages. Okay, I mean, at the beginning they were supposed to do all this for free. Okay, I mean, if you want to live in the forest, you have to do all this for free, but you will get tax exemptions. But later, instead of tax exemptions, they were actually given a wage. Okay, that was the development in Indonesia, in the islands of Java. Now let's see another typical case that happened here. It is known as the Salmons challenge. Okay, so what is this Salmons challenge? In 1890, okay, I mean, whenever you study about these areas, other colonies, you have to compare it with India also. What British did to India, the exact same thing Dutch did to the Indonesians. That's it. Alright, so what is the Salmons challenge now? In 1890, a person known as Surontiko Salmon of the Randung Blangtung village, he actually questioned the state ownership of forest. Okay, Britishers are saying that, the Dutch people are saying that the forests are reserved for the state. So this person, Salmon, he questioned this. He said, how can the state own a forest? Because the forest is grown from, natural habitat. The state did not plant the forest. So how can they own it? Okay, so he started questioning this. And when he started questioning it, more and more people started joining his kind of ideology. Eventually, this became a widespread movement. Okay, by 1907, it started in 1890. By 1907, around 3,000 families were following his ideas. Clear? Around 3,000 families were actually following his ideas by 1907. So it gained a lot of traction by this time. You can see this figure here where the Java islands are shown, railway line is shown here. Okay, the entire Indonesia region is shown. This is Java. Here the railway lines are put. Okay, so for all this purpose, lots and lots of forests were cut down. So the Salmonists, these people protested against the British by two methods. One, when the forest assessors or the persons who come to collect the tax, when they came, these people laid down on the floor, on the forest floor, on the forest ground. This was one. Number two, they refused to pay tax. Okay, so these were the kind of protests they did. It was not violent or anything. It was a very peaceful protest, something like Mahatma Gandhi did in India. We also, the most common method of protesting was picketing and refusal to pay tax, etc., etc. So the same kind of methods were implemented in the Indonesian region as well. Now let's see, how did the First World War affect deforestation? Okay, we have already come to the end of this session, very close to the end of this session. I told you today's section is a very small session, nothing much to explain or anything. But you have to understand this, especially if you are preparing for IFOS exam, Indian Forest Service. These kinds of questions are these kinds of topics are very important for you. Clear? So, war and deforestation. First World War and Second World War that happened between 1919 and 1945. These two wars had severe consequences all over the world. Not just in polity, not just in economy, but also in forestry. Okay, so in India, working plants were abandoned. Okay, in India, the normal system of forestry that was set up as a part of the scientific forestry was actually abandoned, and in its place, people or the British colonizers started felling down the trees indiscriminately. Why? Because a war is going on and the British needed supplies. Okay, as a part of World War I and World War II, Britishers needed supplies. For this purpose, the established system of scientific forestry was abandoned and they started cutting down trees indiscriminately. Similarly, in Java also, the Dutch followed a scorched earth policy. Okay, what is this scorched earth policy? According to this policy, when an army retreat from one point to another point, they will destroy everything that is on the way. Okay, suppose army is retreating from A to B, then everything between A and B will be destroyed. If there are farmlands, it will be burned. If there are forests, it will be cut down, etc., etc. Why are they doing this? They are doing this to make sure that the enemies do not get any kind of supplies from the adjoining area. So the attacking party will be coming here now. So when they reach this region has been destroyed completely. So they cannot grab any kind of resources from this region. This is known as scorched earth policy. So Dutch people, the Holland people, the Netherlands people actually implemented this during the world wars against Japan. Japanese were the invaders here, so they used this policy against Japan. Okay, Japanese on their territories, they exploited the forests recklessly and for their own industries. They also exploited the forests. So many villages were used. Many of the native villages actually used this opportunity to expand cultivation to the forest because already they are cutting down forest. Now you have this land available to you. So this is a perfect opportunity to expand your agricultural land to more and more area. Okay, so if the agriculture expands, it will have more harvest, more produce, more money. So many big landlords and cultivators actually took advantage of these world wars in order to expand their agriculture. As a result, during these times, during the early part of 19th century, the forest cover all over the world started to come down rapidly. Okay, now the last slide for the day, the new developments in forestry. We saw what happened until the Second World War. What is going to happen is something of a different. So since the World War, things changed. Okay, I mean not immediately, but eventually it started to change. In 1980s, governments across Asian and African countries, okay, or the so-called third world countries, they started to understand that the scientific forestry and the policy of keeping forests communities away from the forest was actually counterproductive. Okay, the British invention of the scientific forestry, which was basically exploitation, along with keeping away the local natives from the forest, these two were not working to their advantages. People started understanding this. Okay, so conservation of forests rather than collecting timber has to become more important. Okay, why? Because earlier the only reason why Britishers tried to prevent locals from entering the forest was to conserve timber. Because forests were considered as abode of resources, especially timber. But now people understood that there is much more to forest. It is not just timber. There are huge number of species. There are wide varieties of resources, species richness, etc., etc. So you have to conserve forest and not, see it as a commercial exploitation place. Clear? So this can only be done by local participation. people eventually came to understand or accept the fact that without local participation, it is not possible to conserve forest. So all these kinds of developments and awakenings came during the later half of 20th century, especially after 1980s. Alright, so in India's case, for example, from Mizoram to Kerala, dense forests have survived only because of the villagers' protection. Okay, the local community protected this forest. Say for example, some of them were considered as sacred groves. Okay, the concept of kavu, which is prevalent in Kerala. Okay, so similarly, such kinds of belief systems, considering forests as gods, considering for forests as this abode of gods, all these kinds of belief systems also helped in conserving forest. Eventually, we see that by the start of 1990s, more and more policies are implemented. Globally, it was accepted that felling down forests is actually creating huge havocs like climate change, etc., etc. Alright, then we see the Rio Summit in 1990, the Earth Summit in 1992. Then various protocols are implemented. And right now, in this modern world, we are trying to increase the area of forest cover. Okay, as a part of the Paris Climate Conference of 2015, all the governments are now trying to increase the forest cover within their territory by a specific percentage. Otherwise, by the end of this 21st century, the global temperature will go beyond 2 degrees Celsius compared to the pre-industrial era, which will cause a lot of area around the globe to go underwater. Okay, so due to all these reasons, since the since the last 2 decades of the 20th century, people started to change their perspective towards forests and they actually started to conserve it rather than exploit it. Okay, so that is it regarding the 9th standard CBSE textbook. We have completed chapter 4 today. The last chapter, chapter 5, will be completed tomorrow. Okay, and by this, the entire textbook, that standard 9 NCERT textbook, is done. Alright, so today's class was comparatively shorter. Usually I go on for 2 hours, but today I am ending it here. So thank you everybody for joining. I hope you enjoyed the class. Please use my code MSRW1 in order to avail 10% discount on any Unacademy subscriptions. Also follow me on my Telegram channel t.me/MSRW1. Okay, so that is it. Again, I have a class today at 8 p.m. at Unacademy app where I will be taking portions between First World War and Second World War. The World History series is going on there. So kindly join me here at 8 p.m. The link is provided in this Telegram channel. Okay, so that is it. Thank you. Bye-bye.